We're continuing to look at Mary in our series on women who encountered Jesus. And this is Mary, the mother of Jesus, we're looking at. And in the last session, we talked about all the things God was giving her to validate what was happening to her. Prophetic signs, prophecies from Simeon, Anna, the visit of Gabriel, the visit of the angel to Joseph, and also the visit of the Magi. And we talked about how tradition tells us that the Magi, that there were three of them, but the Bible really doesn't say three. It does mention three gifts, which is, I guess, why we always assume there's three wise men. Tradition also tells us names. What is it? Caspar, Melchior, and Balthasar, I think. But the Bible really doesn't mention those names, but those are traditional names that are given to the to the wise men. And also the timing. Tradition tells us that the Magi were there during the actual birth of Christ, or right around when he was a newborn. And with the passage we're going to read today, we kind of maybe think that wasn't true. Maybe he was a little bit older, maybe as old as 2 years old by the time the Magi arrived. So those are the things we don't know. What's other interesting thing about this I was thinking about today is that none of the other Gospels talk about the Magi. Matthew's the only one that records that. Matthew was a disciple who wrote the gospel, a gospel. Remember, there are four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The interesting thing is that, like, the Gospel of John really emphasizes a lot of different things that happened that prove that Jesus was the Son of God. That's what John was really intent upon, or that seemed to be kind of a theme in his gospel accounts. The Gospel of Mark was much more factual. It was almost like a newspaper reporter, giving all the facts and talking about all the things that happened in order. Luke was very much involved in talking about Jesus as the Son of Man and emphasizing his humanness and his love for humans and the fact that he was Son of God and Son of Man. That seems to come through very strongly in Luke's gospel. And Matthew was very involved in talking about the kingship of Jesus. So he starts out with the lineage. He doesn't even start out with the stable and the whole thing. See, Luke is the one that talks about that whole thing of going to Bethlehem and no room at the inn and all of that. That is that human part of Jesus that's so precious to us. And Luke presents that so beautifully in his gospel. But when Matthew comes along, Matthew starts actually with Joseph, seeing the angel and taking Mary as his wife. Mark doesn't even go there as far as that. He starts with John the Baptist and starts really with Jesus' earthly ministry as an adult. And John, his gospel starts out, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. So he talks about, again, Jesus being part of the triune God, that he was there at creation. And then he talks about, how the Word came into the world, but that's the only thing he really mentions about the birth. He goes right on in Jesus' ministry. But it's Matthew that starts out way back with the lineage of all the people who had what son, and this one had this son, and this one had this son, and this one had this. So he's showing the lineage of Jesus as the son of the King of David, okay? And he also then includes the account of the kings coming to visit Mary and Joseph and the baby. So it's interesting that he's always talking about Jesus' kingdom, and he relates a lot of stories that show us that Jesus is king and will come again to be king of the world. And so the fact that he is the only one that talks about kings coming to visit the king, it doesn't surprise me. I wonder where he got this story from, though. See, I think he had to have talked to Mary about it. It was only Mary and Joseph and the baby that were there when the Magi came. The Bible doesn't tell us anything about other people being there or prophesying or spreading the news. Not like when the shepherds had the angels come and then they told everybody. Or even Anna the prophet. It tells in the Bible that she told everyone she knew, everyone that was involved and looking forward to Jesus coming. She told them that she had seen this baby in the temple. That story, that part is not recorded in the Bible for us. So we wonder, how could Matthew have known about the Magi? Well, my thinking is it had to have been Mary that told him. Because Mary, of course, was still there in Jesus' earthly ministry. There's no mention of Joseph. We don't know what happened to him. But we do know Mary was there at the cross. So she had to be there, and at the tomb. So she had to be there throughout his whole ministry. She's even mentioned once in Acts that she was in the room with the disciples who were setting up the early Christian church. So I obviously Mary would have known Matthew, and perhaps she related this story to him. I don't know. But through the power of the Holy Spirit, he translated it into part of the gospel and recorded it for us, which is just a treasure, really, because we know that they brought these three gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And we talked in the last session that the gold meant that they considered him a king. The frankincense really meant that they considered him a deity, God, because incense is the prayers that we offer to God are symbolized by incense. And then the myrrh meant that they understood he was not just God, but also man, because he would die and suffer as he saved his people. So God gave Mary the access to these magi who would have validated for her that her son was going to be a king. She didn't understand exactly why. All of these things, Gabriel and Anna and Simeon and the Magi and all of these things, I'm guessing that in a lot of ways, all of this didn't gel for her until much later when she looked back on it. And isn't that true of so often in our lives, that we don't see the plan until later when we look back? So today we're going to look at another angel that came to Joseph, because we talked about the first angel said, Joseph, don't be afraid to wed Mary, because what she has conceived is of the Holy Spirit. So that was the first angel that was there. But there is a second angel that comes to Joseph. Remember, at this point when we were talking yesterday, this is in the book, or the last session, in the book of Matthew, we were looking at Matthew 2. Yeah, Matthew 2. And that was the visit of the Magi. And remember, after they went to Herod and they found out that the baby was going to be born in Bethlehem, and they left to go worship him. And Herod said to them, oh, come back on your way home and, tell me where this baby is, because I want to worship him too, which was a lie. He was threatened by the king, the baby king. He wasn't really going to go and worship him. And the Magi were warned in a dream. So they did not go back to Herod, and they went home another way. So meanwhile, right after they left then, we are in Matthew 2, verse 13. And this is the second angel that's sent to Joseph. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, and take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. This is part of the Christmas story, but this is not the happy little part of the Christmas story that we're used to, is it? I mean, here they are in Bethlehem, and suddenly there's a threat to Jesus' life. And God is protecting Mary, protecting Joseph, protecting the baby by saying, get up and get out of here. Go to Egypt. This isn't all lights and tinsel, this part of the Christmas story, is it? It's more reality of what was happening politically at that time. The king was threatened by this baby. So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt. He did not waste time. He got right up immediately, woke everybody up. Come on, we're leaving. We're going to Egypt. Can you imagine how Mary must have felt? Whoa, wait a minute. What do you mean we're going to Egypt? I thought we were going back to Nazareth. I mean, she really had to be flexible here. And she also had to have faith, because she had an angel that visited her. And now when her husband says, hey, I had a dream, an angel came to me and said, we better get out of here, we're going to go to Egypt. There had to be a faith there for her to believe that God was working in this whole situation. I'm sure she did not expect that when she had this wonderful baby that was the king and the savior of the world and the wonder of Israel, the glory of Israel, but get up in the middle of the night and flee. You know, there's a lot there that just doesn't really make sense in our human minds. So they did get up in the middle of the night, though, and they went to Egypt. So he got up, he took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. We don't know how long that was, but I'm thinking it was a while. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. Okay, where is this? I looked it up. It's in the book of Hosea. Hosea 11:1 is where the prophet prophesies this. And he says these exact words, out of Egypt I called my son. That's another part of this plan that Mary isn't going to understand right away, but later on it will be, clear to her that that some of these things occurred because they were Old Testament prophecies that needed to be fulfilled. And each one of those prophecies that was fulfilled is a way that God cemented the truth of Jesus coming to the world. That it was proof to the Israelites and proof even to us today that it couldn't have happened by coincidence or accident, that all these prophecies were fulfilled by one person. And God set it up that way on purpose, and he used all these different things. It was like a giant jigsaw puzzle, and God had all the pieces, or a beautiful tapestry, let's say. And very often we only see one string of the tapestry. Mary only had 4 or 5 strings of the tapestry. She had the prophecies of Simeon and Anna and the angels that had come to visit her and also visit Joseph. But still, she wouldn't have understood the whole thing, because God's plan was revealed little by little by little. And it's only as you look back at it that you see what was happening. That is so true in our lives as well. We think we see the whole thing. God sees the whole picture. We're only seeing a tiny little bit, our tiny little bit. And we don't know that God might be using the very small little things that are happening to form a beautiful blessing for us, a beautiful blessing. And this is where patience and faith come in. And Mary definitely had the patience and the faith for this job. That's why she was picked out specifically by God. So this verse in Hosea is chapter 11:1, and it says, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son." So he's saying his son is the one that was called out of Egypt, and that's Jesus. So somehow Mary and Joseph had to get to Egypt. And at the same time, God was protecting them from Herod, who had a human plan to destroy the whole thing. So God used this fleeing to Egypt as part of the grand plan. I can't imagine how Mary must have felt fleeing to Egypt. The Israelites had been captives in Egypt for a long time, and now they were not. And it's interesting also to me, when I was thinking too, is when I got thinking about Egypt, it made me think of Moses, because of course Moses was the one who went to Pharaoh and said, "Set my people free," and he freed the Israelites from captivity in Egypt, and then of course took them through the wilderness, and they wandered for 40 years and eventually crossed the Red Sea, crossed this into the land of Canaan. But when they crossed the Red Sea coming out of Egypt, God did miracles to save them at that point too. And you see how Moses, though, in a lot of ways is a symbol of Jesus. If we look in Deuteronomy 18, verse 13, this is what Moses says to the people. He says, Moses continued, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your fellow Israelites, and you must listen to him." So he's saying when I'm gone down the line somewhere, God's going to raise up an even more important prophet, and you need to listen to him, and he will be a Jew. And when we think about all the parallels of Jesus' life and Moses' life, first of all, now Jesus is going to Egypt with Mary, and of course Moses was in Egypt, so they both had to come out of Egypt. They both had the mission of set my people free from bondage. In Moses' case, they were in the bondage to Pharaoh and the Egyptians. In Jesus' case, bondage to sin. And he actually was, just like Moses, he was a leader to bring people out of bondage, out of the captivity. Just really, and actually both of them also were rescued from being killed as infants. Because remember, at the time Moses was born, there was also an edict to kill all the babies. And then when Jesus was born, there was this edict to kill all the babies. So even as infants, they were one of the few infants that would be saved in order to fulfill their mission on earth. So obviously Moses is the one who got the commandments from God and gave them to the people. Jesus says to the people, a new commandment I give unto you. You know, he is fulfilling the perfection of the old covenant. And just as Moses gave commandments, so did Jesus. So he really is a mediator. Moses was the mediator between God and the Israelites. God came to Moses, gave him the commandments, and he mediated down to the people. Jesus is our mediator between holy God and sinful man. When we have Jesus, our mediator, he is the one who allows us free access to God through Christ. So he's our mediator. So that's just so many parallels, the meekness, the humility, the leadership. There's so many ways in which Moses was a type or a symbol of Jesus. But the main thing was in this story is that they both were saved as infants, and they both went to Egypt or lived in Egypt. So out of Egypt I send my son. So Moses knows he was in Egypt, and now he's saying you're going to have another prophet that will also come out of Egypt. Just interesting, just interesting. I can't imagine Mary, though, going to Egypt. First of all, she would have been an immigrant. We know how hard it is for immigrants, right? I mean, there might have been other Jews there still, because there had been Jews there in the past, but it's difficult to be an immigrant. Sometimes you don't speak the language, you don't know where to live, you don't have, unless you have some contacts there, it's not easy to become an immigrant. Then there was the fear, the fear of Herod. And, I just think even the traveling, with the baby and the whole thing, it just was, it would have been difficult. I can't even imagine what she's thinking all this time, because, of course, she has been prophesied about the greatness of this baby. But don't forget, Simeon told her also, a sword is going to pierce your soul. In other words, this isn't going to be easy. And it's not just at the cross that it wasn't easy. You think of all this stuff thrown at Mary all at the same time, and a lot of it probably did not make sense to her at the time. Just like us, looking back at it in hindsight, she probably put the pieces together and understood it more fully as an adult than she did as a young girl. This story continues in verse 16. It says, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. So this is why we think Jesus might have been up to 2 years old, because the Magi saw the star when Jesus was born, and then they would have been traveling and finding out where to go and so on. And of course, Herod asked these Magi specifically, when did you first see this star? He wanted to figure back, how old could this baby be? And he wasn't taking any chances, so he killed all of the offspring from 2 years and under. Can you imagine? The mothers in this, that The thought of killing babies, 2 years and under, little innocent babies, because you're threatened as a king, is quite revolting and disgusting, isn't it? I mean, it really is upsetting to think that someone would go to that lengths for power, to go to those lengths. But God wasn't about to let that happen to Jesus, and he wasn't about to ruin his plan, for Herod's sake. So he sent the second angel to Joseph and said, you need to get out of here and go to Egypt. We don't know much about what happened in Egypt because we're not told in the Bible. But we are told that in verse 19, after Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up, he took the child and his mother, and he went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in the town called Nazareth. And so was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Another prophecy fulfilled right here. And another angel, in fact, 2 more angels. So let's see. I think that makes 4 angels that were sent in dreams to Joseph. And everything that was done with Joseph was affecting Mary because he was making the decisions for the family. So God was using Joseph to protect Mary and the angels to talk to Joseph. So he had one angel told him, go ahead and marry. The second angel told him, time to go back flee Egypt, flee to Egypt. That's the second angel, said, you're not safe here in Bethlehem, flee to Egypt. The third angel said, it's time to go back. And the fourth angel said, don't go to back to where you were, go to Nazareth. So all of these things were conspiring to fulfill the prophecy that said, what was said through the prophets, he would be called a Nazarene. So he's fulfilled the prophecy of Bethlehem. He's fulfilled the prophecy of a virgin giving birth. He's fulfilled the prophecy of coming out of Egypt. And he's fulfilled the prophecy of being called a Nazarene. And Mary has been involved in all of this the whole time. But I don't suspect that she saw the whole picture. And I know I'm never happy when I don't see the whole picture. But very often God puts me in that position because he wants me to trust him. And as I trust him more, my faith and trust grow. So there's no other way to do that but to have some uncertainty and then see that God is indeed working for you. Until we talk again, have a wonderful day.